The South African Insurance Association says it'll pay out all legitimate claims following devastating floods in KwaZulu-Natal. Thousands of households and businesses were affected. Let's talk more about this with South African Insurance Association CEO Viviene Pearson. Viviene, good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program. Where are you seeing the most in terms of claims? Is it mostly personal insurance or businesses?
What I can say at the moment, from a South African Insurance Association point of view, we don't have a big picture of the claims happening that's being dealt with by our individual members. But I would imagine it's both, personal lines and business. You will have also noticed there are a lot of cars damaged, not only property and so on. So it would be both of those types of claims.
And let's talk about what you've said this week, that you will pay out all legitimate claims. What is classified as a legitimate claim, given that this is a disaster situation where many people will have had no control over what happened?
Yeah. In terms of what a legitimate claims is, really is what you are insured for, i.e., what is in the contract. And this type of event, this is typically what insurance is for. So it depends on what is in your policy, and it is easy to find out what is actually covered in terms of your policy by just contacting your broker or your insurance company. All you need is your ID number. So I would like to advocate that people do that as soon as possible. But as you've noted already, many people have already lodged their claims with our members.
Mm-hmm. And on the daily, how prepared are insurance companies to deal with claims that would come in from such a massive natural disaster?
Yes, you have mentioned before that this is one of the largest, if not the largest, natural disaster South Africa has experienced. So yes, there will be some challenges, but that would really relate to the conditions on the ground. Insurance companies are set up for these kind of things. Yes, this is a different type of situation in terms of many thousands of claims going to have to be handled. But they have already put systems and people in place, even in the impacted areas, to assist policyholders. There may be some delays in terms of the infrastructure issues, with access to the impacted areas and so on. But the insurance industry is ready to assist their policyholders.
And you mentioned infrastructure issues. The one problem I could imagine coming to mind is some areas that are still inaccessible due to trees that were uprooted, roads that were damaged. I mean, we've seen entire areas basically split in half from the impact of what happened this week.
Yes, it is really devastating. We're talking about bridges gone or completely damaged. We're talking about roads. We're talking about debris all over the place. And as you said, trees and so on, part of that. So, yes, that would be a challenge. I'm sure that is a big challenge for the residents themselves, for many other economic sectors, and certainly also for the insurance industry.
Is there a generalized industry assessment of the risk profile of a KZN resident, a KZN business, as far as disasters are concerned? I mean, in 2019, there were floods, yes, not to the severity of what we saw this year, but based on what we're dealing with in 2022, and some experts saying that this is likely to become more frequent, should there be a generalized and perhaps steeper, I suppose, profiling of people in that part of the country for disaster risk?
Yes, insurance and risk always go together. So insurance is to cover risks, and as the risks become more prevalent, the insurance industry will respond to that. But I listened to your previous participant on this program from the UN, and really it is extremely important to recognize that climate change is here with a full bang, and here to stay. So the insurance industry certainly, we've been talking to stakeholders and seeing, what best one can do to mitigate against these risks going forward. And I was very, very happy to hear the points made by your previous guest around collaboration, because the insurance industry itself can't do everything. Government certainly can't. Any individual or economic sector or business or whatever can't really address this issue on his or her own. So it is important that, as was also noted by your previous guest, the building regulations, building in the right places, building infrastructure that's resilient to climate change, because this is here to stay. And that particular area and other areas in our country are going to be prone to these kind of events. So we must all really work hard together to see how best we can mitigate against these risks through insurance, but also reducing that risk, because insurance can only be sustainable as long as it's affordable. And as the risks goes up and up and up, it is potentially, likely that premiums will go up with those kind of risks, unless we can find ways to mitigate it together.
Just on what you imagine to be a future collaborative relationship between yourself, government, and the other role players, shall we say, how would you imagine that should work going forward?
We've already been collaboratively involved with all sorts of government entities. For example, we are also part of the National Disaster Management Forum. We also work together with COCTA and the same players that the UN guest has talked about. It is really about building towards a better future. In addition to the environmental and social goals that we all need to follow. We are talking about carbon reduction and so on. There's already insurance players and specifically reinsurance role players who are not in the market any longer, to, for example, insure coal-fired energy generators, generation, and so on. This is particularly a difficult area in South Africa because we're very reliant on that still. So it's something that we are talking with government, specifically our regulators as well, National Treasury, who is the government that's responsible for the insurance industry, around how do we address these issues with regards to reducing the carbon footprint. But practically on the ground, it is about building the right infrastructure, building in the right places, building the capacity of government and municipalities to deal with these kind of events. So that's where we see the partnership lies.
Viviene Pearson, CEO of the South African Insurance Association, thank you for your time today.